This is Tor Storley, and I am back with another video. I thought in this video, I've been playing around a little with it lately, and it kind of reminds me of the older days when I used to do a Windows form development. So I looked at some of the possibilities that are existing for Python and cross-platform development. Simple apps, nothing, it's nothing corporate, that kind of size or style. But I thought we should be looking at how you can incorporate something called tkinter, but it's a flavor of tkinter that is using Bootstrap formatting. So it's a ttkbootstrap we're going to be using here. And also, I like to mix it up a little bit. In addition to that, I want to also use the Yahoo Finance API and get some Web API data from Yahoo Finance. And also I want to incorporate a library that is a subset of NumPy, which is called numpy-financial. So in this video, I want to go through that and I will show you what I got. And let's get started. Okay, so in order to find this stuff, you need to go online. And you go to https://numpy.org, numpy-financial, and you'll find the numpy-financial library there. And as you can see here, they tell you how to install it and set a reference to it. So you can see it here. Now this library has a lot of functions. Well, not a lot, but it has the basic functions you need, like future value, present value, net present value, and so forth. So it has that kind of capability. So if you're going to do some financial calculation, this library is good to know about. The other place you probably want to go is to this ttkbootstrap website. Just do a Google search for ttkbootstrap and you end up here. And they have quite a good documentation. You can see they have themes. So you can go and set up the different kind of themes. So you have light, you have, several light themes. And you can scroll through them and find something you like. And then they also have dark themes. So when you get a little further, probably next page here. Here you can see there's solar, there is superhero, darkly, and cyborg if you want a sharp contrast. And then you of course have some weird colors like purple if you like that. So yeah, take a look at it. And it's based on the Bootstrap library. So you can see here, if you're familiar with formatting with Bootstrap, you know that they use these specific colors for buttons and so forth. So what they allow you to do is to set those, depending on what you want your app to look like, you can set at a high level for the cyborg, for example, for the whole window. And then you can style individual components using these primary, secondary, success, info, warning, danger, light, and dark colors. You just set a reference to that and it will style them accordingly. So we'll look at a couple of examples here. So they have quite a nice library. And another thing that is nice that I'll be using here is if you go in and you go up here and you go to the API. So make sure you study this documentation because it's very, they have a lot of good examples in here. The one I want to work with is this table view module. So if you scroll down to that one, you can see it here. It's based on the top of something called a tree view, I believe, and it's styled accordingly, on the top of that. But you can see here, you can do things like filtering, you can sorting, and all kinds of stuff like that. And again, they give you a little example here you can use. Now we will go beyond the basics here. We're not going to hard code values. I'm going to get the values. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be grabbing some data from Yahoo Finance, and then I'm going to insert it into a SQLite database, and then I'm going to retrieve it back into a data table like this and show you. So that's kind of the purpose of this demonstration. A second app that I just want to show is using the numpy-financial library, and I'll do some mortgage calculations and place them in a grid. So I'm fairly new to this, so the code is not the best. It works, but it's not super clean code. Maybe you want to use classes and things of that sort if you're skilled within Python. That might be a better solution for some of this. So you can reuse the code, especially if your GUI forms library get a little bigger. So without further ado, let's go and take a look. So I got this Visual Studio Code setup, and it's a mess here because I loaded into this virtual environment. But what I have here is a couple of these files. So let's look at the get stock data from Yahoo Finance first. So what I've done here is I'm importing some libraries. I have some issues with, the basic Python libraries to get them to actually be referenced here. The Visual Studio has some weird sense of overriding, and I don't know what they're doing in here. But I got it to work, so I'll just leave it like that. Then I have put a doc string in that explains what this is all about. I'll show you the different inputs you're going to be using, like the ticker you want to look for. What's the interval? Is it every minute, every 2 minutes? Is it every day? And so forth. So that's the interval for the data that you're getting back. The date range is how much data do you want back. For example, do you want it for 2 years? Do you want it for 6 months, for 1 week, 5 days? So that tells you kind of what the expected values are that you need to supply. Then I have a calling syntax here that is based on my calling syntax, so you will have to change it. But the file sits in this virtual environment here. And then I also have some arguments I'm passing in. For example, the symbol, which is the ticker, the date range, and you set up those values according to those values in the doc string above, your interval, and I had 2 flavors and I left it in. You can either save it to a CSV file and give that CSV, file name here, passing it in, or like I'm doing, I create this stocks database in SQLite. So that's what I'll be using in this demonstration. But you can also save it into a CSV file. Now, I'm not going to make this video so long, like I normally have too long videos, I think. So I'm going to try to go a little quicker through this time. So I won't be dwelling on every little snippet of code here. But you can set up something called an arg parser, and you import that by simply calling it here, import arg parse. And that'll allow you to parse out the arguments that you're passing in to this file. So I'm creating a parser here. I add an argument, and you add it the way you wrote it, like this. But when you get it out of there, it's not going to have those dashes because you're going to parse it out of there. So it will grab the value and just ignore this one. It tells you what kind of it is. This is for string. And then you can have some help stuff. Now, I don't really know how to use this part, but that's the way you add this into argument parser. So I add 4 of those: symbol, the ticker, date range, the interval, and what I want to call my database. So I'm going to call it whatever, stocks DB. Okay, and then you parse out the arguments. So they go into this variable here. Then I'm setting up a header because I have to call Yahoo Finance. And what you can do is you can simply go to your browser. In my case, it's Google Chrome. I'm not sure if this works for every browser. But if I go here, all I have to do is just simply say, my user agent, and it gives me this piece right here. Just copy that and go back into your Python file and, write the word user agent as a key and then paste the rest of it in here like this. And that's your header. Then I created a function called get data from Web API. I'm passing in the ticker, which comes from an argument, the interval, and date range, which are the other 2 arguments I'm passing in here. Now I'm building the URL. And this one is long, so you can see it here. I use a base URL, etc. And then I'm building in an F string where I incorporate those arguments that I'm passing in, as you can see here. So that's how I'm building my URL dynamically like this. All right, you can look at the code when I post it out on GitHub if you want more details. Then you combine the 2. I'm just printing it so I can see what I'm getting. And then I create a response object because I used the request library, pass in the URL and pass in the headers. And then I simply print out the status code coming back from my API call. And you wanted to see like a 200. That means it's a good response. And then I'm returning the response text like this. I have a couple of helper functions, converting the timestamp. When you get the data originally from Yahoo Finance, it will be in Unix timestamps. So it has like a long number, and that's not really what you want. You want to see the dates. So what I'm doing here is I'm converting it into an actual date. So that's what this code is doing. Then I'm parsing out the stock data, meaning whatever I get back from Yahoo Finance. And I do that by calling this function, passing in the JSON string from that output, the one I returned up here. And I'm passing also in the output file and the ticker. Now, you don't need this output file if you're using a database, but you can see it here. I'm using this one here. It's one of those arguments I'm using. So technically speaking, I should have probably put that in here instead of this. But it picks it up anyway, so it's not a big deal. Okay, so here you have to parse out the JSON that comes back from Yahoo Finance. And it has like a top level chart, and then it has another array here, and then you're going to the first array you find, and then you're going to the meta tag. So these variables just kind of parse out the portion of that JSON file you're getting back. Timestamps, I'm converting them right here, and I'm loading them in here into so this becomes these become lists. And here I'm creating a dictionary, and I give it a key, and of course this is the array that all the timestamp. So it could be anywhere from 5 timestamps to, depending how many years you do. If you do 5 years, then you might get 1,200 of them. So it all depends. This is how you load the other parts from that web API call. And then I'm doing a try, catch, create a connection to the SQLite database. This is where it's going to be. And then I create a cursor and attach it to the connection I just generated here. And then I have this statement that says, if the table doesn't exist, create it. If it does exist, don't. And that's what this is doing, executing that cursor statement. And then I'm inserting the data, and you find out how much data you're going to be grabbing from looking at one of those columns at the timestamp. And that will give you the count of how many times you're going to loop this. And then you execute each row like this, and you're passing in. I also pass in the ticker. Anyways, I'm passing that in, so every row will have the ticker with it. And then I'm simply pasting in the timestamps and the rest of the columns like this. Then I commit it, and then I have an accept. In case there's something gone wrong, you can catch it here. And then don't forget to close your connection. And that's pretty much it for that one, except for if you want to write it out to a CSV, you could use this. And I return the data here. This is where I actually call my function. So I start here, ticker, interval, date range, and database file. Grab the value from the args that we filled up above with the parser. Then I simply print them out. And then I load the data that comes back from the web API here. And then I load it into this variable here. So this has become like a JSON object. And then I pass into this function to parse it out. And that's what the code is doing. So let's run it now. What I can do is I can open up my Anaconda. So this is where I'm going to run it. Now, whenever you create the database, it's not going in here for whatever reason, because I'm not pointing there. It goes into this address, C users and my name. And that's where it goes, the database, when I load this. And if you look at this code here, you can see I'm opening Python. I'm calling this file, which is the one I'm in here, passing in the symbol I want and the date range and so forth. I'm going to change this to one of the things you can set this. I think it was 2 years. So I'm going to do that one. I want daily data for those 2 years. So let me go to the end, and then I'm going to run this. All right, so I got an error because I forgot to change from an output file to a DB file. Okay, I think I confused myself there. I was looking for this stock data database, but I noticed when I created these records, I called it stocks.db. So I went then and I set up a connection to stocks. And as you can see here, here's the table that was created. And the ticker is text, so is the timestamp, and the others are numerics. But if I look at the data, you can see here, here's the ticker, and here's the timestamp, so it's just a string. And some of these numbers are have a lot of decimals and so forth, so we're going to fix that before we present it. Okay, so I went ahead and I loaded some more data. So as you can see, I have 2 years worth of data for each one of these tickers. So I got Apple, AbbVie, Amazon, Palantir, and I got Tesla. So as you can see, now we got a 503 record count. So that looks more promising. Okay, so as you can see, the data is now in a SQLite database. Now we want to actually look at it in our own app. So what I did was I created this very basic app here that is simply data. That's all that's on the form. So let me show you what that looks like. So I have some import statements for the Bootstrap, the TTK Bootstrap. And you should always have an alias for it, because otherwise, sometimes if you have a lot of imports, there might be same name in some of these libraries and it gets confused and you kind of make a mess. So you should use an alias wherever you think it's going to be an issue. And then I import from Bootstrap constants. I import everything there, and I import the table view. And you have to do it this way in order to get it. And of course, the SQLite and the datetime library in Python. Okay, here is where you create a window. This is your main window. You can give it a name like app or root or what have you. Base it on the TTK, which is the Bootstrap library. You create a window, and then you can give it a theme name. You can do Cyborg, Darkly, those themes we looked at in the beginning. So you set that there, what the overall look and feel should be. Then I'm setting my geometry, because you have to set the size of the window you want to use. And there are some other settings here too you can do. But if you do, say, 1140 by 780, you should get a fairly large window. Create a dictionary object like this. And the stretch is false means that whenever you size the window, it doesn't stretch out with it. And that's, you can set it to true or false. This is the method, one of the methods that TTK Bootstrap is using by loading in like dictionary, like a list of dictionaries. It's one way of doing it. I'm not sure if you can do a list of lists too. I'm not so sure, but this works. Create a connection to my database. It's called stocks now, I guess. Like this, let me save that. And create a cursor again, do a select star from stocks. And then I have this formatting thing I'm doing. So it will take a little more time now because I go row by row and field by field. So I can get it to look more pretty. Because if you remember, the look and feel of this wasn't very great. So if I go in here and refresh and then look at the table, you can see here, it's kind of ugly the way it looks. So we're going to fix that so it looks a little better. And that's why I'm formatting it like this. And of course, I add the row 0 as the ticker. Append it to this list, and then I keep looping. Then I close my connection, and then I create a table view. And again, you can go back to the documentation to figure out how many of these things you can set and what they do. I'm using a success boot style, which basically will give the color to the headers. And I don't want stripes, but if you want stripes, you can do something like this, and then it will alternating between white and gray. And that's what these colors we set up upstairs, in the beginning there, the app style colors will do default here. I think you can set whatever color you want here. And then I want a page size, because it's pagination. I want 50 records at a time. I don't know, you have to kind of see the size of the window you want to use. And then in tkinter, you use something called either you use a grid, which is the recommended version, where you can set where you want to place your widget, whether you want to place it like in column 0, row 1, 2, or what have you. But in this case, it's just one thing here, so I can just use a pack method. And there are some settings within this pack you can set. You can have pad X, how far over in the X direction do you want to go padded by, how far from the top do you want to go, and so. And then in every one of these applications, you always got to end it with this app main loop. Okay, so let's just run this and see what we're getting. So I'm running it. And it popped up over here. And remember, I used the success, so it has that green color. And you can see here, it loaded all the AbbVie data. I can also search for, like, what if I want to say Palantir? Hit enter, and now you can see Palantir data. And you also can search by dates and so forth. And down here, you get pagination. You can do one pagination at a time. You can go to the very end, very beginning. Or if you're in the middle of somewhere, you can just click this guy, and it will jump to the top again. So right now I got a nice little grid, and I have some colors that are in success. I could go with another one maybe. How about warnings? Is that what it's called? Okay, let me save that and run it again. So I'm running it again, and this time it looks like this. So in any event, you can see this is how you can set up a basic data grid. And the next step I want to show you is one that uses a mortgage calculator and has a little more widgets on it than this one. So it's not much though, but I'll show you that next. All right, let's just jump into the next one too. There's not that much difference. I'm doing my imports here, and I'm calling on numpy and numpy-financials. Here I'm setting up my window, and in this case, my bootstrap is called TB. Okay, so tb.window. You give it a theme name, and you can choose by different ones. We could try a different one in this one. Let's try it darkly on this one. Okay, and I give it a title in the root window here, the app, and I'm setting the geometry again like this. Then I create a list, principal amount. I'm setting up my columns that I want to pass in, and you can do it like a tuple too, like you can see I'm doing a tuple here. So I'm going to have a number, payment, interest payment, principal payment, and balance. So that's going to be my mortgage amortization table, if you will. Here again, I'm setting up my table view, and I'm setting the reference in the root here because I have to actually place this because I have more than one widget. So I have to place it in, and I'm doing it in the root, which is the main window. So here you can see I'm using the grid method. This is kind of messy because I created several grids. I could have just laid it out in one grid, I think. But I was experimenting when I created this first one here, so it's a little ugly. The code is a little ugly, but if you need to, you can hack along on it and create your own. But make sure you kind of get a feel for these grids because they are important how you lay it out. So here you can see, for example, that this particular table view I want on the bottom. So I'm saying I want this in row 2. So in other words, I'm going to have something in row 1 and row 0. But I want it in the column 0 here, and I'm padding it in the X direction by 10. Then I create a calculate function, and this is kind of where the numpy-financial come in. And I'm using some calculations here, and these are financial calculations. I do have a time value of money video that I did, so in case you want to kind of brush up on the present value, future value, and so forth, make sure you take a look at that one. First of all, I'm using whole numbers here, so I have to divide into 100 to get it in decimals. And then I divide on 12 because that's an annual rate. So I want to bring it into a monthly rate because that's what you do. You divide the rate and you multiply the periods or the years by how many periods per year you're going to be using. So the periods here becomes how many years your mortgage is times 12. And the years is simply referring to this variable here in the years meter. And the years meter is a widget. It has a list of values. And it has a few settings you can use, like amount used for the meter. So you can create these kind of cool meters. And if you look down here, they have some sample code here. I'm capturing how much I used. So that's this value, whatever that value happens to be. And then I have a text amount, which is basically a widget, and a text entry widget that I'm going to use the word get to get the value from it because that's how you do it inside this ttkbootstrap. Then I'm making sure that the principal is not null or empty and it's not less than 0. And if it is, then I spit out this text here. And then I do the same thing with the rate and the years. So I don't want those to be any. This, since I'm using a meter now, it's not going to be a problem. But I used the spin box and so forth before, so that was an issue. Here I'm setting up my information that is going to generate the table. I create this number of periods, the portion of the mortgage payment that is purely towards interest, and the portion that is purely towards the principal. And you can use these numpy-financial functions, which I gave an alias to npf for numpy-financial. So these are built-in function in that library you can use. And then because I have a data table set up and I'm going to reuse it, I don't want to create a new one every time, I'm simply deleting rows if there's any in there. Then I'm doing my for loop, and depending on how many periods there is, I'm going to loop through it and get the payment here, like you can see. And I'm getting my payment here by combining the two, a portion towards the principal, a portion towards the interest. And then I'm adding to the principal amount the amount of the payment that was made towards the principal. So you have to add that up, and I'm doing inside that index you can see here. That loop will take and build each row like this, and I'm formatting it again. And then finally, I'm inserting the rows into the end, and then you use this keyword end, so you're going to append it to the last record. That's going to add another one to it. And then I'm loading the table data, and then I have some setups here, and you can look through this code. Creating a frame, make it equal to root. This is kind of where I'm laying out my widget. So I have a label widget, like you can see here. You can see I'm linking it to this frame, and then I'm using a pack here. And then I have another label here. And then this is where I'm setting up my text amount, the text entry. As you can see, I can set the boot style and the font. You know, it keeps going through this, and it keeps adding some additional grids here. It creates a meter frame, for example. I'm setting that up to be in row 1. And then I simply pass in, for this meter is going to belong to this frame, and so on. And these are the kind of settings you can use. There might be more, but so far, these are the ones I used. You keep going like with a second meter, because I want them side by side. So the second one I'm setting in row in column 1. This one is in column 0, so they'll be next to one another. Then finally, I create some buttons that I want to execute some code with. And the way you do that, you call a function using the command equals to, and that will call this calculate function that you put on the top here. So if you look, there is the calculate function here, and that will execute this code, whatever that is. So that's my mortgage calculator. So let's run it now and see what it looks like. So I'm going to fire it up, and it'll probably open on the other screen. So let me bring it over. So it looks like this. It's not pretty. And like I said, I kind of tried to learn this as I went. But I can set up in a mortgage amount. Let's say I want a mortgage for, I don't know, 200,000 maybe. How much is that? 200,000, right? And then these meters, I set the initial rate to be 525 and this one to be 15 years. But I can scroll, as you can see. So that makes it a little more interesting. I can do like 30 years mortgage. Maybe the interest rates is 425. You know, in good days that was the case. I don't know what's going to be going forward. But then I can simply calculate. And when I do, you can see it formats the data here. It has 30 pages, as you can see. And you can kind of go through each one and look at the balance of it changes, how much was paid towards the interest and how much was paid towards the principal. And of course, in the end, you pay very little towards interest because about halfway point, they switch. So in the beginning, you pay a lot towards interest, so you get good tax consequences as a result of it. And towards the end, you're getting much less tax benefits, as you can see here, because most of the stuff is getting paid towards the balance. But yeah, so you can see there's my calculator, and you know, you can change these colors depending on what you want to do. So anyways, just so you understand this part, this is the amount I used, and you can set up the values according to how you want it to go in steps. I'm using for the meter that has the rate, as you can see down here. Just want to show you that quick. Here I set it up to be a max of 30, and I set it to be 15 when it starts up. Here I set it to be 5.25, and I figured out I don't need more than 20% interest rate. And here I'm setting a step size, so you can use that to kind of set it up in increments that fits whatever the app that you are creating does. All right, I hope you liked this video, and let me know, and I look forward to see you again very soon. Thank you.